all the way from New Zealand. Caroline has been an entrepreneur. She has been a CEO. Now she's focusing all her time on doing very important research work in the world of dementia. Caroline, welcome. Can't wait to hear more about your work.
Hello, and I miss all you lovely people in the UK. So nice to see familiar faces again.
Hi Caroline, fantastic that you're joining us, and I'm sure that a lot of people that are listening in will feel just like Sanga said, that we're actually being joined by a friend from far, far away now. How are you in New Zealand?
Yeah, good. It's I do miss the community, although I do connect still to the community via social media. But I miss my family, obviously, but I am coming back to the UK soon. I've got a conference in Finland in a couple of weeks, and then I head back to the UK, which is really exciting.
That's thrilling. Nordic also. Ooh, good to hear. And we just learned in teeing up the episode that your dog's called Freya, and I obviously took that as a Nordic relation as well. But Caroline, as Sanga said, you were the CEO of Three Spirit for a very long time, more than 10 years. And then you suddenly decided on doing something completely different. How was that?
Well, Three Spirit was a labour of love, and Three Spirit still continues. But about 10 years ago, Three Spirit was going, but actually it was just before Three Spirit, but I decided to do something crazy with my husband and take a year out and travel around the world. We just had a baby via IVF, so it was a very kind of pivotal time in our lives. And as we travelled around the world with the baby in our rucksack, an open rucksack, not a closed one, we got to New Zealand and we spent a bit of time in New Zealand, and I really loved it. I fell in love with it at that point. And then when I came back, I just was always having the call, to come back to New Zealand. So things were starting to build with Three Spirit, but I managed to, with the help of the brilliant Holly, who's one of the fantastic team still at Three Spirit, for her to look after the company. And I came backwards and forwards for 10 years. And over those 10 years, and one of the years, I met a woman called Karen Lake that works for Ryman, and she had such phenomenal vision around dementia care, and got me involved with working for an organisation called Ryman, and they asked me to develop a new model of care for them, which I did from overseas, that won an international award for being an innovative model of care for dementia. So I finally, with my work with them, I finally made the decision to come bring my cat and my dog and my family over to New Zealand after a very sort of long love affair, really, with the country.
Wow, that's quite a move.
Yeah, very brave. I think we all agreed when you did it. So how are you finding it now? Have they been as good to you as we want them to be?
They are an organisation with the most incredible capability, Morten. My team alone, there are 30 clinical and quality team. There are 30 very smart, I want to say mainly women, because we are mainly women, all specialists in their area. And, as an organisation, they're very brave, and they've got a big heart. All of those things combined make for a really great place for me to be. I really am valued there, and I've got quite an extensive role. I sit across several different work streams, so including care, so supporting the delivery of the model of care, the research work streams, so setting up research around dementia, also the design. So I work really closely with the design team to make sure that the model of care works with the design team. Lots of work around technology as well, which is where my real passion is. And then I also support the evolution of the education strategy there. So and they got me when I first came here. They had me on an aeroplane every week, which was really exciting. I went to Australia, I went to the South Island, I went to every single village that they had where they had a dementia special care unit, they call it. And I did a dementia environment audit, and it was a really great way to really get to know the organisation, you know, from the ground up, to meet the people on the ground. And it was an adventure, but it was also very tiring.
I can certainly understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. Absolutely. So you are clearly enjoying what you're doing there, clearly falling in love again with New Zealand. We could hear that in your voice. I liked what you said there, you know, smart, brave, and kind hearted. So, what can we here on the other side learn from, you know, your latest experience there?
Well, where to start? Well, one of the things that I'm really interested in doing is introducing more technologies into Ryman, and you know they're willing and able, and you know it's not easy implementing new technologies. And I did quite a bit of work in the UK before I came around technologies, which is how I got to meet you guys, you know, initially. We did that work with Skills for Care on the digital strategy. And so a lot of that learning, if you like, I've brought over. So we did a lot of work around, you know, from the outset, from how you work with stakeholders, you know, how you build a business case, how you manage your values and ethics, you know, in terms of the integration of technology, data intelligence, which I know, Sangha, you'll be really interested in, you know, around what language you should be using, how you use data to tell a story, you know, how you make sure that the people analysing the data have the right skills so that, you know, the right things fall out of the data set. And understanding the kind of range of technologies. Obviously, I'm really interested in dementia technologies, but I'm also interested in education technologies, you know, and how they intersect. So, you know, with that strategy work that I did, it involved a lot of stuff around device management, how to contingency plan, how to implement, and all of those things. So it helped me in preparation for my work at Ryman, you know, because I kind of had an overview. And then with Three Spirit, we had to go through digital transformation like a lot of organisations had to. And, you know, in fact, I was on the plane back from New Zealand when the pandemic hit, and I was all the way back. I was thinking, I'm not going to have a business when I get back, because it was all face-to-face training. But luckily we were funded by VocTech Trust for digital transformation. So they went alongside us with consultants. So that was a really fantastic learning experience. And we utilised technologies a lot to improve impact of our learning interventions. So we started to sort of play around with it there, which is where the Carly idea was born, you know, really thinking about how we can utilise technologies to make a difference on the ground. And then alongside all of that, I started reading, and I've got brilliant doctorate supervisors, Dr. Grant Gibson, who's an expert in dementia, and then Dr. Terry Lynn Thompson, who's an expert in education and technology. And together they absolutely blow my mind. You know, the stuff that they've introduced me to alongside that practical experience gave me skills, I guess, to start to look at what the possibilities could be in this organisation that is, you know, ready and up for it and interested.
That sounds fantastic, and that's a somewhat groundbreaking experience, both for you, but also if I sort of from afar look at it, try and discover what kind of an organisation it is that you've ended up in. It sounds like they've got a lot of the things that I at least look for when in my work, when I'm trying to assess whether an organization is ripe or mature in terms of transformation. And I think most often it's of course got to do with some very practical things, but it's most often the heart of the organization, or the soul, that's, and you're saying some of the things that Sangha's also honing in on. They're brave, they are they're obviously looking to do something, which is, I guess, it's that willpower of an organization, and that if you can align that also in that many people that work towards achieving a transformational goal, then fantastic.
And Morton, it's also about staying relevant. Technology is transforming the world that we live in. And as a business entity, you have to capitalize on the use of data in order to stay relevant in the market, and be competitive in the market. And, data can go horribly wrong. So, it has to be implemented in the right way. But there's a lot happening in the dementia world as well. There's been leaps in research in the last few years, across many domains, including early detection, risk reduction, technology, all of that stuff combined with the position that the organisation is in, makes you think, well, we're not getting any more funding for aged care. That's the terminology that's used in New Zealand and Australia. So it falls on providers to do things smarter, and so to do more with less. And to do more with less, we need to utilise technologies in a way. So my doctorate research is really interested in organisational learning and how we use digitally mediated practices to enable that learning.
And can you say, because I've obviously just had a quick look at sort of the one pager for what you're doing with your research. Can you say I realize that you said now funding is part of why you're going and exploring different ways of doing things. But when I was listening to you, I wasn't hearing what I sometimes believe that I'm hearing for, let's say, the platform for digital transformation in the UK, which is very compliance-led and very, to some extent, I would say, unambitious when it comes to dreams and goals. But it is, of course, ambitious in its own right. But am I hearing that you're saying that what's driving this is also something slightly more qualitative?
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Morton. And I'm exploring that in my research, how limiting compliance requirements are. And if you think about organisational learning, it is heavily impacted, and we are just the same here in New Zealand. Australia have a slightly different regulatory system, and Ryman sit across both. So it's hard to kind of understand the differences sometimes. But in terms of understanding organisational learning and how technologies intersect, you've got to be able to understand the role of compliance, and in fact how it limits us. For example, in terms of data, the data that we're dictated to collate is not always the right data. Is it better to collate information around staff well-being as opposed to the amount of falls? Or, it's the variety and the velocity of data rather than the volume of data. So part of what I'm exploring in my research is, how do those forces impact on us negatively? And so how can we then harness them more positively? Go.
Sorry, I agree with what you are saying there with regards to the limitation that many times, are enforced, or we think that is enforced by the regulatory bodies or because of compliance. But, I often say with the providers that we work with that is the base. That is like the hygiene factor you are collecting, whether it's data or whether it's a process that you are overlooking. But what it does is actually gives you the ground to do more, like what you are saying. You shouldn't be restricted to what the regulators or what the compliance requirements are. You should be thinking about your business and how you could create value for all your stakeholders.
Now, I agree, Sangha, but the challenge is, and this will be very relevant to Morton, one of the things that I've been looking at is critical software studies. So how things like digital care plans are developed to respond to compliance needs. So you've got to have the technological capability in order to collate the data that you need. So there's some responsibility also on people that create the software to think more expansively. For example, one of the limitations that we have with a lot of digital care planning systems is what we call in the research is around spatiality. So it's where you're needing the data at the point of care. So where information sits on a digital care planning, but the care activity is taken is undertaken somewhere else. It's, you know, how the technology is interacting in the moment in the care activity that's in a way of both sharing and enabling the collection of data. So it's a challenge for us as a deskless community to really access the benefits of technology. So the idea around Carly app was, when it was first envisaged, was that it would be integrated into the flow of work. So the frame, if you like, the theoretical model that I use in my research is it's nothing that's uncommon in dementia care. It's around the materiality. So it's about how we work with the tools of practice. So how our relationship with things, our relationship with technology, and how we interact materially, rather than looking at learning as something that's shared between people's heads, because actually you can learn so much more if you look at things from that perspective, you know, how people come together around a digital care plan and do all the knowledge work, or how people use other tools. There's some really exciting stuff going on in terms of looking at how these technologies can evolve to integrate more into the flow of work so that they can have more impact.
Yeah, you've touched upon a very important point in there. You know, it's not just about looking at what technology can bring, but also what are the processes that's supporting that usage of technology, and are we giving enough time to the people to actually, you know, participate in all those properly? Because, like you say, it's a deskless culture, right? So we face that, and Morten, I know you handle that day in, day out. Like, we are not sitting behind the desk, so how do we continue to use a technology and go completely paper free? So yeah, it's
interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, we use technology as our backup brain if you're used to working like you and I are. You know, and when I went to Ryman, first of all, I just thought I understand the implementation of technologies because I've done it at Three Spirit, but actually it's a whole other beast, because integration within care is completely different. And I have drawn on John Gatsby's, I think that's his name, his plan to develop an implementation plan for pain check, which is another technology that is utilised quite frequently within aged care. And I also really like something called the NAS framework, which is more like an academic type framework, but it's used to review the implementation of technologies. And I've been able to take some stuff from that because it looks at things like wider influences like regulatory systems, for example. Because the thing about the environments that we work in is that they're so complex, and there is something called complexity theory, you know, and this is so relevant to understanding how we integrate technologies into our day-to-day work. It's so exciting, but at the same time, you do need to be careful because there are harms, you know, with the introduction of technology. So we mustn't get carried away with solutionism, I think is the term. And we must think responsibly about the impact that it has on the people that we support, including our workforce. You know, I had hoped to design my dream project, Carly, around a technology that was really primarily there for the carer, you know, because integrating well-being with learning, you know, because really we need to have the two working together. And, you know, that's essentially one of the fundamental drivers around the survival of our sector, is looking after our workforce. So those things are really important.
Absolutely. Can't agree more on there.
No.
Right.
And I can, from a requirements perspective, I can see that shooting up everywhere now, that there's an expectancy over time that solutions like care planning systems and so on will, in a far more extended way than today, include aspects of training, and the profiling for the individual user is growing and growing and needs to grow in comparison to what it is today, just a name and very flat. So I can definitely follow you on that, Caroline.
And just the last point on that, Morten, in my work, I'm redefining blended learning, because blended learning isn't just about our interaction with education technologies, but also digital care plans, other technologies. So that was the most profound thing my supervisor said to me in my last supervision, is that you're redefining blended learning. So it's blended learning in the flow of work.
I think that's a very good place for us to thank you very much for having joined us. And I think we will put some links, if possible, Caroline, I'll ask you later for that, into the show notes, so we can make sure that there's a few concepts in there that maybe not everybody were familiar with already. For instance, blended learning. And then when you're doing a hack on that, we certainly need a link. So we'll find that and then we'll provide that in the show notes. Thank you very much for joining us today, Caroline.
Thank you so much for having me all the way from New Zealand.
And enjoy your dinner tonight or now.
Thank you. Oh, it's so nice to see you guys.
Thank you.
Keep connected.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, review, and share your favorite Take Care podcast with your friends and colleagues. Until we meet next week, take care.